Okay, here's the big news today, and it's big for Canada. Germany's defense minister just told Canada we will move our own submarine deliveries back so Canada could get its boats earlier. Basically, Germany voluntarily said take ours first.
Germany and Norway have come to Canada with a pitch that says a lot about where the world is going, Dave. They are not just offering submarines, they're offering Canada a seat inside a shared Arctic defense system with NATO allies who are actually planning for the world we are living in right now.
And the timing, it's really hard to ignore. The U.S. just paused an 86-year-old defense board with Canada, one that dates back to the Second World War. Then Germany and Norway show up in Ottawa saying, we'll work with you, we'll share production, we'll build a common fleet.
That's quite the contrast. Washington is actively driving a wedge between itself and Canada, and Europe is at the door with submarines, jobs, and a plan.
Yep, this is not just about buying a submarine, though. This is about what Canada wants its next 30 years to look like.
So let's back it up for a second. Canada's submarine situation is, I say this with all the affection I can muster, a mess.
Yep. Canada has 4 Victoria-class submarines. They were built in the 80s by the British Royal Navy. Canada bought them secondhand in '98. And they have been plagued with mechanical failures, flooding incidents, corrosion, fire, you name it. These boats, they've had it.
Which isn't exactly comforting when you remember Canada has the longest coastline in the world, a massive Arctic frontier, and Russian submarines, they're not sitting around waiting for our procurement department to find its reading glasses.
Definitely not. So the federal government is looking at buying up to 12 new submarines. Now, that would be one of the biggest military purchases in Canadian history. And the 2 finalists are South Korea's Hanwha Ocean and Germany's TKMS backed by Norway.
Okay, let's start with South Korea, because their case is really compelling, and we should be fair about all this.
Yeah, Hanwha Ocean is pitching the KS-3 submarine. They actually sailed one across the Pacific to Canada for the evaluation. Now, that's confidence, right? We want this contract. And South Korea's shipbuilding industry has become one of the most capable in the world.
Their pitch is built around speed. 4 submarines by 2035, which is the fastest timeline Canada has been offered. The KSS-3 is also a larger submarine than the German-Norwegian option, which could give Canada certain operational advantages.
And they're promising significant industrial investment in Canada, not just selling hardware, but promising Canadian jobs, Canadian maintenance, and Canadian supply chains.
If Canada's biggest priority is getting capable boats in the water as fast as possible with major domestic economic return, South Korea is a strong argument. Do not underestimate it.
But then there's option 2, what we're talking about today, Germany and Norway. They're not just saying buy our submarine, they're saying join the fleet we're already building.
Which is a fundamentally very different offer.
Yeah, Germany and Norway are already jointly procuring Type 212CD. It's a shared program. They're building a common Arctic and North Atlantic platform together, and they're asking Canada to become the 3rd partner in that fleet.
Okay, so let's walk through what that means in practice, because people might hear joint fleet and think, what, are we sharing submarines?
No, not sharing submarines. Canada would own its own boats. Germany owns theirs. Norway owns theirs. But the countries share everything that makes operating submarines sustainable over decades. Training systems, maintenance, spare parts, software, weapons integration, and the experience that comes from operating the same platform.
So, Canada's crews would not be starting from scratch.
Not at all. Canadian submariners could train alongside German and Norwegian crews. If something breaks, Canada's not alone trying to source some obscure part from the other side of the world. Our allies are using the exact same platform, dealing with the same systems and controlling the same region.
And that matters in the Arctic and North Atlantic because these waters are not forgiving. You need equipment that works, crews that are trained, and partners who understand the region.
Yeah, the Type 212CD is designed for stealth. It uses air-independent propulsion, or AIP. In plain language, really what that means is that the submarine can stay submerged and hidden for much longer without the need to surface.
And when you're talking about submarines, hidden is the whole point, right? If you are easier to detect, you are more vulnerable. If you can stay quiet and stay underwater longer, well, you can patrol more effectively.
And then Germany moves its own deliveries back. Wow. 4 boats for Canada by 2036, 1 year after the South Korea's timeline. But with a commitment that says they want Canada in this badly enough to sacrifice their own schedule.
You don't do that for any customer. You do that for a partner.
And this is where the Arctic piece comes in as well, because the Arctic is no longer some distant frozen map at the top of a classroom globe. It's becoming a strategic highway. Shipping routes are changing. Russia is active in the high north. China calls itself a near Arctic state, which is a very creative use of the word, I would say.
Yes, it is. But Canada, it has communities, resources, coastline, sovereignty, and security tied to that region. For people living in the north, this isn't just a military issue. It's about whether Canada can actually monitor its own territory, protect its own waters, and show up with more than press releases for its people.
Yeah, for Canadians in the south, it matters as well. Arctic security affects trade routes, energy projects, critical minerals, communications infrastructure, and whether Canada is treated as a serious country when the big decisions are being made.
And for Greenland and Europe, it matters as well. The North Atlantic connects Canada with Greenland, which is part of Denmark, Iceland, Norway, the UK, and continental Europe. If that region becomes unstable, it's not one country's problem. It affects the whole democratic alliance.
Yeah, and that's why Norway is so central to this pitch. Norway lives with Arctic security every single day. It shares a border with Russia, for crying out loud. It watches the Barents Sea. And it understands what happens when a northern country treats defense as something real instead of something to be postponed until the next budget cycle.
And Germany, it brings industrial weight. Norway brings Arctic experience. Canada brings geography, coastline, resources, and a serious need to catch up. Put all of those together, and you can see why this pitch is bigger than just a procurement file.
And here's what I keep coming back to, Deb. This is not happening in a vacuum here.
No, you're right. It's part of a pattern. Canada chose the Global Eye aircraft for Arctic surveillance, built on a Bombardier jet and partnered with Sweden instead of the Americans. Canada and Sweden won the NATO AWACS replacement contract together. And now Germany and Norway are inviting Canada into a shared submarine fleet.
So think about this. Canada, Germany, Norway, Sweden. These countries keep showing up in the exact same conversation. Arctic surveillance, NATO coordination, defense production. It starts to look less like a coincidence and more like a new partnership taking place.
And Washington should probably be paying attention because while the United States is pressuring Canada, like pausing defense boards and treating alliances like invoices, Europe is building the next layer of NATO cooperation.
Yeah, NATO is not just a U.S. project. It never was. The United States has been the largest military power inside NATO, but the alliance includes countries with their own geography, their own risks, and their own capacity to lead.
So what we are seeing now is NATO becoming less dependent on Washington's mood swings, and Germany, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Poland, the Baltics, and Canada, these countries are not waiting around to see what the next American statement says at 2 a.m.
And if Canada chooses the German-Norwegian option, it sends a really clear message. Canada is still in NATO. Canada is still connected to NORAD. Canada still works with the United States where it makes sense, but Canada is no longer assuming Washington has to be the center of every single defense decision.
Now that's a grown-up position, Mr. Carney. It's not anti-American either. It's pro-Canadian. There's a huge difference, even if some people pretend not to understand it.
Yeah. The United States pausing the Permanent Joint Board on Defense was supposed to send a message to Canada. The message was basically, get in line. But the response from Canada and Europe may end up being fine. We'll just build more lines.
Yeah, lines to Berlin, lines to Oslo, lines to Stockholm, lines to Brussels, lines to countries that understand cooperation does not mean obedience to a little baby boy.
Prime Minister Carney has talked about middle powers, countries with serious economies, serious alliances, and serious resources, coordinating without waiting for the superpowers to lead. The submarine offer from Germany and Norway is that real-world example.
It's countries aligning their defense industries, their military planning, and their security interests, not because they're abandoning NATO, but because they're making NATO stronger from more than just one direction.
So, when you zoom out and look at it all, what does this decision actually represent for Canada?
Well, it's a choice about what kind of country Canada wants to be. And yes, it really is that important. Buying a submarine is not just buying a submarine. You're choosing a supply chain, a training system, a maintenance ecosystem, and a set of partners you are willing to call for the next 40 years.
And South Korea's bid still deserves respect here. Hanwha is offering faster delivery, a bigger submarine, and major industrial promises. Canada should take that seriously because speed matters. Our current fleet cannot be stretched forever with duct tape, optimism, and another committee.
But procurement is rarely only about the machine. Canada is choosing a platform, a diplomatic relationship, and a long-term security direction. So once you pick a submarine fleet, you are living with that choice for decades.
And that is why the German-Norwegian offer is so politically interesting. It turns the submarine purchase into a NATO integration project. Canada will be part of a common fleet operating with countries already focused on the same northern waters. And whichever way Canada goes, the larger shift is already happening. Canada is thinking differently about defense. Europe is thinking differently about Canada. And NATO is adapting to a world where the United States is not always the steady hand in the room. We have allies competing for our partnership. We have the chance to build something that lasts longer than one election cycle. So here's what we want to know from you today. South Korea offers speed. Germany and Norway offer integration. Which one matters more to Canada right now?
Drop your thoughts in the comments because we read every single one.
And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to share it, hype it, give it a like.
And subscribe if you haven't already and be part of the team. Check out the links in the comment below because we've got all the fun stuff down there.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.